Hello and welcome to this series of podcasts where I'll be interviewing the movers and shakers of the Welsh economy. What's their background? What sort of business are they involved with now? And how do they see the future for themselves and for Wales? I'm joined today by Richard Theo. Richard, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Now, we look at your CV and it's a highly impressive one. You are the CEO of Wealthify.com. We'll come to that in a second. Advisory panel chairman of FinTech Wales. FinTech envoy for Wales, part of the Treasury. Founder and director of ActiveQuote Ltd, all of which you're doing at the moment. So the first question really, which everybody will want to know the answer to is, do you ever sleep?
Yes, I do try to sleep now at my old age, but you are right. The workload when you're trying to get involved in four things all at once like that is quite significant, and there are a lot of late evenings catching up on emails and things.
And if we look at what you've been doing, you started off, well, you've done many things, of course, but of the things you're doing now, you were the founder and director of ActiveQuote, and that started in October 2009.
Indeed, yeah.
Tell us about that business.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I just wind the clock slightly back from there, I started my career in software, actually. Did a degree and PhD at Cardiff University in those things. I spent the early part of my career in hardcore software businesses, but then I reached a junction sort of 10 years ago where a previous business had reached the end of the road. And I think at the time I was very aware of the emergence of some of the price comparison websites, some of them being in Wales in our proximity. But not necessarily covering all the products. So turned my hand to using that software expertise in financial services in trying to create a business that could do a proper job of comparing health insurance products online, which the kind of well-known comparison sites weren't really doing at all. And that's where ActiveQuote was born. It was quite a steep learning curve for somebody who'd not spent any time in financial services, although my dad was an IFA back in the day in London with an old school playing one of those old-fashioned telephones that used to have to sort of whiz the keys around on. I used to sit and watch him doing that, and probably absorbed a bit of stuff from him back in the day. But yeah, we had to learn fast, and actually ended up having with ActiveQuote to create a very traditional brokerage business, because whilst people like to go online and compare health insurance, in fact, in truth, they stalled in making a decision and needed some help on the phone from an expert. And so we built the business ActiveQuote based on the kind of hybrid of the two, of being best at both. So people compare online and then they get advice on the phone. And
that was quite a change for you. You've been involved in fibre optic comms. So you started with light data.
Yes.
Then, of course, you were the founder of Avantis.
Yes, correct.
So education software, would that be?
Yeah, correct.
So you make this leap, and there's a bit of an overlap I can see between the time you were running Avantis and then went to ActiveQuote. What took you into insurance particularly? It wasn't a field that you'd been involved with before?
I think it's a common theme amongst digital entrepreneurs, which is that they look at a traditional industry and they realize that technology can change it for the better. And that's a common theme you'll see across a lot of tech things, whether it be Amazon in e-commerce and retail, whether it be Uber in taxis, Airbnb with hotels. And that's exactly what happened with me. And it also requires that other key entrepreneurial skill, which is the preparedness to leap off a cliff and dive into an area that you have literally no knowledge about, but be prepared to learn quick and perhaps find people to surround yourself with who help you on that journey.
Yeah, and you've been 10 years with ActiveQuote, and then of course we have Wealthify. What's the nature of Wealthify's business? How does it tail in with ActiveQuote?
So no, the two are quite different, although oddly enough, Wealthify as an idea was born within ActiveQuote 5 years ago when we were sat down seeing our current business in ActiveQuote growing nicely. And we stopped for a moment and said, hey, hang on a minute, let's try and be even more ambitious here. What can we do? Where are financial services really failing consumers? And at the time, the conversation went very much that when you looked at the traditional firms in the market that were offering investment services and financial advice, they were very elite and charging huge amounts of money for what they're doing. And when we looked at that at the time, we could see that people were being enticed into investing, but the fees that some of those firms were stripping out for doing that job were so big that it was significantly eroding people's outcomes. There's quite an interesting analogy. I mean, if an investment typically returns, say, 5% a year, which is a government sort of benchmark they often use when looking at pensions and investments, and you take fees out of that at a rate of 1.9%, 30 years later, you'll end up with £25,000. Whereas if you took fees out of it at just 0.8%, you end up with £35,000. And so there's a significantly erosive effect on people's long-term financial outcomes, these excessive fees. So Wealthify was born of the idea of making an investment service online and on app that anybody could access with as little money as they like, with instant access to the money, so no lock-ins. You can't have your money out unless you lock it in with us, and offering good returns at low cost in a really, really easy-to-use way. And that's what we've delivered with it.
And I see you were backed by Aviva when you were set up. You had investment from them. What did Aviva see was the advantage for them?
Yeah, so Aviva's involvement came a little bit down the line. I think we've been going about 3 years when that happened. One of the interesting things about the investment business model is that it's very hard to make money quickly, especially if your proposition, as I described, is one about reducing fees. So we needed what's commonly referred to in the venture capital industry as patient capital, an investor in your business that's prepared to take a long view for a big win, and invest money without expecting to make a return in year 1, year 3, year 5. And we needed that. So sort of back in 2017, when we were into our kind of third round of fundraising, we were looking at the venture capitalists who might invest, but we also started to look at what we call strategic investors, people who could come along with that patient capital, but also potentially with something else that could help the business. And in the case of Aviva, of course, what they have in abundance is customers. So we started the conversation with them and realized that there was they'd reached a point in their evolution where they were looking for better digital solutions to some of the problems that they offer products for. They obviously have plenty of cash, and a marriage was born where they invested a lot of money in us, gave us access to their customer base, and we sort of took that investment on board. And I think it's a huge success story to have done that. Wealthify at the time was only a 3.5-year-old business, and yet we were backed by one of the UK's largest listed businesses. Yeah. So great.
Give us an idea of the models. Obviously, you encourage individuals to invest. £1 is the minimum amount of investment. And obviously what you look to do is to build investment plans for people. How is that different perhaps to what a bank might do? For people who are individuals, they see a world of unit trusts and OICs and all that terminology. But if I was to ask you, what do you do that's different to what perhaps a bank might do through private banking, or what's the advantage?
So, private banking, the term you just used there, is very much for super affluent people. In fact, you'll find if you go and try and talk to a private banker, the first question he's likely to ask you is how much money you've got. And unless the answer is $1 million, $2 million, even $5 million in some cases, he won't even come and talk to you.
They've never troubled me, to be honest.
Well, you're a politician, ex-politician, should I say. The banks, there was some sort of work that the regulator did, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK back in 2012, which also looked at the work the banks have been doing in helping people with financial advice and actually giving really bad outcomes and taking too much commission from the products they were recommending people went into. So a lot of the banks actually completely pulled out of that whole market, which in some ways created an interesting opportunity for companies like Wealthify to emerge and do that kind of thing. And still today, the banks are only starting to sort of come back into that. Of course, with all of the things that happened with the financial crisis and the government and the regulator telling the banks that they had to sort of disintermediate and split themselves apart and separate investment banking from retail banking, the banks are still now actively pursuing that, those goals and those mandates that the government have given them.
So if I am a customer with you, I go into the website and I can set up an investment plan there and then?
Yep. Hopefully 5 minutes. You go to the app, download the app, or you go to a website. You can enter some information like how much you've got to invest, what your appetite for risk is risk versus reward, and we will show you kind of the colour of your money, what you could make out of an investment with Wealthify if things go nominally. And then you proceed to sign up, and 10 minutes later you have a plan, and then you can engage with it every day on the app to see how it's growing. Of course, I have to say with investing, money can go up and down, and people need to be aware of that.
The value of your investments can go up as well as down.
Well, you'll have seen that everywhere, yes, indeed. And it's actually obviously important that people understand that. But if you're taking a long-term view on investments, and you're not sort of looking for a return because you need it to buy your house next year or to go on holiday next month, then it's a very sensible thing, because back to that point I made earlier about the erosive effect of fees, you need more out of your money than the 1% at best that your bank will pay you in a savings account. Truth is that today inflation runs at 1.7%. So if you're getting less than 1% interest on your savings account, your money is actually going down in value in real terms. So the worst thing you can do is lock that money up in savings. Of course, right now, today, I promised myself I wasn't going to use the B word. But right now, today, people are pretty risk averse, worrying about what's coming politically with all of the stuff that's going on with Europe. But I think once we get past that challenge, people should again be thinking about a much more long-term view of their money and making sure that what they're doing with their money in terms of savings and investments and pensions as well is giving them a head start and beating inflation, so that when they reach retirement or older life and some of those goals that they want to achieve, taking nice holidays, buying a place abroad, buying a fancy car, whatever floats your boat, that you've put yourself in the best position to achieve that.
There's an old joke that how do you tell if somebody's over 50? Answer: they know exactly what the pension looks like.
Yeah.
It's interesting stuff in terms of what you told us about the way people need to plan for the future. And I remember a time in the 70s when inflation was running at 25% annual, and no one could get a return on anything.
Yes.
Even shares in that time.
Yes,
and people were buying
yes.
gold sovereigns.
Yes.
Now they buy gold sovereigns because they kept their value.
I remember trying to buy my first house in 1988,
Right.
and being gazumped over and over again.
Yeah, and it all collapsed then 3 years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then negative
yeah.
equity was an even worse problem than it was in 2008.
Yes,
Almost.
absolutely.
Yeah. Also keen, of course, to share your experience. Advisory panel chairman of FinTech Wales, and also the FinTech Envoy for Wales for the Treasury. If we look at the second one first, FinTech Envoy for Wales, what does that involve?
So about 18 months ago, the UK government had just been working on its industrial strategy and had seen that FinTech, the use of technology to disrupt and improve financial services, is a key strength for the UK, but was heavily centred in London. Something like 80% of all the businesses in London, realising that's not a healthy position for the long term for the UK, in that being in London is great, but costs are high, offices are expensive, staff are hard to recruit, you have to pay them a lot of money, they leave as soon as somebody makes them a better offer. So the UK government's idea at that point was to ask a bunch of people around the regions of the UK to act in these roles of FinTech Envoy, to try and promote and help to grow an ecosystem in their region. And they asked me to do that on behalf of Wales, because they'd sort of seen my sort of entrepreneurial activities down here. And I took that on. It's a sort of a free role. I rather mistakenly listened to their suggestion that I might need to give half a day a month to achieve those goals, realising now that was probably slightly naive. But nonetheless, I've dived in headfirst, as I suppose I tend to do. The interesting sort of thing that happened then really was trying to interpret that challenge that they offered. Was, crikey, in Wales we've got our own government. I think you might have been involved with it back then.
On occasion.
And actually, of course, politically very different type of government, different political goals, and a different set of, and rightly, a different set of objectives and ideas around what's right. But actually, at the time, there was an alignment in that the Welsh government also were looking at fintech and seeing the opportunity there. So, in trying to interpret that mandate, how do I take this UK government challenge, marry it with Welsh government, and get the two working together and get us all working together effectively to do something good? We ended up with the idea of creating an independent, industry-led initiative, and that's where the FinTech Wales project was born. There's been quite a lot of quangos spun out of governments which have had government money to get them going, which have ultimately ended up hitting the buffers and failing and being closed down. What we didn't want to do was create something that suffered that same set of consequences months down the line or years down the line. We're sort of reaching the end of the road, government funding being pulled, and then there being no way forward. So with an industry-led initiative in FinTech Wales, we've pulled together both the large financial services companies, the Admirals, the Principality Building Societies, with fintechs, one man who's just got an idea and wants to have a chance to start it, and created an organisation which they can all embrace and to sort of work together to try and create an ecosystem here in Wales which allows somebody with a great idea for a new financial service product to go out and try that idea, start their business up. And FinTech Wales will endeavour to support that person by helping them with a bit of mentoring, networking, make sure that they have the right access to finance in terms of introducing them to the right people, with time, we might get involved in more things too, such as opening an incubator or a hub so that they can surround themselves with people. And I have to say, it's met with a universal support from all of the people we've talked to. And we're on a trajectory now of trying to start that organisation going and get it off the ground. So to any aspiring entrepreneur listening to the podcast, come and talk to us, tell us your ideas, and we'll see what we can do.
I can't overestimate how important it is to have one organisation that speaks on behalf of an industry if you're in government. Otherwise, you end up talking to individual businesses, or when I was Rural Affairs Minister, individual fishermen.
Yes.
Because there was no organisation representing the fishing industry. And it's a nightmare because you can never be really sure what the collective view of the sector is.
Yes.
So I think that's hugely important to be able to have a one-stop shop for government ministers to be able to talk to somebody and understand what the challenges are in a particular sector.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the challenge that throws back to us, of course, is how do you distill the opinions of a multitude of different businesses with different goals and objectives into one common theme and message. But I mean, that is absolutely one of the roles of FinTech Wales, is to try to distill common themes that everyone shares, that need to be brought to governments and regulators with one voice so that they are heard clearly and acted upon, rather than poor government trying to listen to all these different opinionated sort of points of view.
You can't. Basically, you're listening. It's like white noise on the telly.
Yeah.
All you hear is any number of different messages, and you're never sure which is the right one or what's the majority view even.
Yeah.
So having an organisation, particularly one that's independent of government.
Yes.
So I've always been concerned that if government funds an organisation to represent a sector, they're going to pull their punches a bit. They're not going to be. Are they going to be as frank as they need to be because of how they're funded? That's the issue for me. So being able to have an organisation that's self-funding, I think is hugely important.
Yeah, so but it does create its own challenges. To try and do meaningful things when you've got no budget to start, it requires people to stand up and be counted and put some time and energy in early doors to get that going, which we've got a few people have really come forwards and made an effort with no personal benefit out of it to try and get that started. We are working quite hard to try and access some different pools of money to power ourselves up so that we can really, really make a difference with it. But if it goes well, Wales has actually a very unique opportunity to become the leading, well, if not the leading, certainly one of the leading clusters for fintech and financial services outside of London. After all, we are just 2 hours to London. One can't deny that London is the prime market for this stuff in the UK, and it will remain that way. But the companies that operate in these circles need locations where they can develop software, where they can run marketing functions, where they can run customer service functions. And Wales absolutely really can become a leader in that if we get this sector powered up. Yeah. So it really is one to back. And actually the UK is unquestionably the leader in this stuff globally. There was more money invested in fintech businesses in the UK than than any other country in the world, including the US. Last year, so long may that last. Let's try and be the leader in that sector going forwards.
No, it's an interesting sector, and one of course which people didn't know much. 20 years ago when I started, you'd never heard the phrase called fintech. It was still very much.
Yeah, it's funny how it's because quite a few businesses. I mean, the phrase sort of. I was trying to muse the other day. When did the phrase come into existence? And I think it probably 7 or 8 years ago, and it's quite amusing to see how now companies that were in existence 20 years ago are now saying, "Oh yeah, we are a fintech." It's a good thing though. I mean, when a sort of phrase or it's almost a brand for a particular type of product and technology, it helps galvanise people, and it's been very helpful that the phrase fintech has been used and the phrase being coined, because it's created a whole sector that can be talked about and backed. And so that's been helpful.
One question which I want to ask you is, here we have a man from Wimbledon, someone who did O-levels. I like that. Just as I did. Computer systems in Cardiff.
Yes.
Then your PhD in computer networks. And in 2004, you opened a sushi restaurant. Where did that come from? That's a bit of an outlier, isn't it, compared to your previous businesses?
I think we'll write that one down as a vanity project.
My kids loved it, but they loved it.
Yeah,
they always wanted to go there.
Yeah, that was at the time. I suppose the story there is we've got to learn from our failures, right? And that wasn't a total failure. But at the time, sushi was quite a new thing to the UK. There had been one chain, Yo Sushi, that had sort of kicked off in London and seemed from the outside to be doing quite well. Actually, the truth, I only learned this fact later, was that it wasn't doing very well at all. At that time, it subsequently turned itself around and worked out how to make the model work. But yeah, we didn't have a conveyor belt sushi restaurant in Wales, and so as a bit of a flight of fancy, as a parallel project with my main businesses at the time, myself and another person who was more of an expert in the restaurant market than myself, had a go with that and set it up, and we're very, very proud of what we achieved. But I'm afraid that Cardiff and Wales wasn't really an ideal location for it. I think we estimated in the end that there was less than 5% of people would even walk through the door, with perceiving sushi to mean raw fish and things like that. So it was challenging. Business actually, it got to the point of breaking even and doing okay. And then I kind of realised, though, that there was probably unlikely to be a chance to turn it into a new chain restaurant. So for me, I decided to move back to kind of my core expertise in software and technology, and that was sold on to a restaurant chain who carried it on for some years after that. Sadly for them, of course, in Cardiff, the centre of town sort of moved as St David's 2 was developed and built. Literally, the centre of town, the sort of centre of mass, the gravity moved from the far end of Queen Street to St David's 2, and I think it would have been quite difficult then to carry on.
I saw sushi for the first time in Hawaii, of all places, in 1993. And there were two of us who had come up from New Zealand, flying home and stopped in Hawaii on the way. And I remember thinking, what the hell's that? It's a ball of rice with fish inside it. You cooked it, look. it was just completely out of our experience. We'd never seen anything like it before. But we went there a few times. We certainly enjoyed it. So we were very satisfied.
We did have some very notable clients at the time. I remember Gavin Henson was a keen sushi lover and was in there with Charlotte quite a lot at the time. So
Richard, the future. What does the future hold for you personally, do you think? What are your plans?
Well, I'm very committed to Wealthify right now. We have a long path to build a household name investment brand, so very, very committed to that. I do muse to myself and wonder whether I have one more entrepreneurial project in me beyond Wealthify. I'm 56 years old. I don't know is the answer as to whether I do, but I keep my ears to the ground and keep thinking hard about things that can change the world and disrupt, and I wonder whether there's one even bigger thing to have a go at if it comes along. If I have the idea, maybe I'll give that a go. I don't know.
Where does that word disrupt become something positive?
It becomes positive when it changes things for consumers.
I know
for the better. If
you used it 5 years ago, people would have seen it as a negative, wouldn't they?
Yes,
it's become a positive thing. Isn't it?
It is a positive thing. I mean, not everyone sees it as a positive thing. Some people view that the pace of technological change isn't necessarily the best thing for society. We all now wrestle with the effect of mobile phones on children. Is it a good thing? I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and getting them off their devices. If they ever listen to this, they will be laughing, I'm sure. But it's not necessarily always good. And I think when you hear some of the statistics around the mental health of children today and how that's changed for the negative in just the last 10 years, it's quite scary. And I think there's something we're going to need to think about. But yes, broadly, disruption is good. It generally gives access. Airbnb, as a good example, has given more access to accommodation for people around the world more cheaply. That can only be a good thing, but it has to be balanced.
So you don't see yourself retiring yet?
I don't think I'm quite ready for retirement yet. But,
does a work-life balance? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that is a tough one. It's probably in my case not adequately balanced.
That's true for a lot of us.
I think modern society has foisted that on us. We to succeed, you have to move at pace. It's never more true than in technology. If you have an idea for a piece of technology that can change the world, don't sit on it and wait till the time is right. By the time you've got off your bum and gone out and had a go, you'll have missed the boat. If the time is right, you have got to act quick and move fast and fund it up and get on with it. There is no time to dilly-dally. And that's the other thing I would often say to people when they ask about entrepreneurial things is one of the challenges we have here in Wales is that we need some of these businesses to be more ambitious. So if you have a good idea, believe in it and please go big with it if you can, because it's those ones that go big will be the things that make the really big difference for Wales in the long term. We are looking for the next unicorn, and really the next business that can become a $1 billion company.
It's a particular weakness that we have in Wales, where people get to a certain size as an SME and then sell. Very few businesses actually make the step to getting themselves listed on the AIM or on the LSE and perhaps go public. I mean, there are a handful of companies in Wales.
Indeed. Yep, I agree.
So in 10 years' time, I want to imagine that we're sitting here, neither of us retired. If I were to say to you, what would you like the Welsh economy to look like at that point? I mean, FinTech, of course, you mentioned that, but in more broadly as well.
I think we have to... I really hope that we can engender more of an entrepreneurial culture here, really. Truthfully, the agenda for governments has always in Wales been jobs. It's not jobs that is the solution to the problem. That's only ever an interim solution. What we need are businesses that are successful, entrepreneurs who inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, who inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, because it's those people that create wealth and profit that is sustained here and retained here and spins out. If you look at the knock-on effect of Admiral, actually all of the other names that we have on our list of fintechs in Wales are actually a result of Admiral's success. Go Compare, Confused.com, ActiveQuote, even Wealthify. You've got to join the dots 3 or 4 down the line to get there, but we couldn't have started Wealthify without ActiveQuote being successful. ActiveQuote was only successful because Go Compare and Confused.com were there, and they only ever existed because Admiral was successful in the start. So the effect, the chain reaction effect of 1 or 2 big successes in the wider economy is absolutely massive, and we've got to do everything we can to make sure that we have those big successes. So 10 years down the line, hopefully FinTech, hopefully powered up by FinTech Wales, will have become a big thing. We'll have not a cluster of 100 as we measure today, but a cluster of hundreds of companies based here, that we have important side offices for London businesses based here, doing exciting things, knowledge jobs, software development, marketing, data science, cybersecurity, all those kind of things. And we have a city and a region in South Wales and Wales more generally, because it certainly will spread out of South Wales if we can build the success here first. But we have to go where the success and the momentum is, which is in South Wales today. And hopefully we'll have a vibrant city with a real ecosystem where people are meeting and networking, talking about their ideas. Lots of people are feeling that they have the support and the encouragement to go out, and that's rewarded and acknowledged by society. And celebrated, well done, you set a business up. We need to hear a lot more of that kind of language, and people need to recognise that. Don't celebrate a footballer, celebrate an entrepreneur who had a go, and even if they failed, celebrate the fact that they had a go. And if we do that, then Wales can be a very successful place, and it has some unique advantages in the short term. Because it has Welsh government and its own pools of money and funding. It does have advantages running businesses here in some of the support that you can get through having that advantage.
Richard, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure to be able to listen to your journey and your plans and everything you've done. And all I can say is, Richard Theo, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Carwyn. Very much enjoyed it.